Let me put myself on mute.
Oh,
Can we mute until it's time for us?
it's
Oh,
time. It's time. It is 2 p.m. We are starting on time. I'm super excited that these incredible women are here. I am going to double check and make sure that we are live everywhere. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to invite these incredible women that are honored and acknowledged as top innovators in corporate wellness. And for everyone that's joining, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. These are not women that you want to multitask and not listen to what they have to say, because they are changing the world of medicine, the world of work, and our world in general. So, thank you, ladies, for being here. I know you're busy, I know you got a lot going on, and I appreciate you being here. I want to open just by introducing everyone on the panel. And for the women that are here, and for those of you who do not know, all of these doctors have their expertise is necessary in our lives as people, but then also a responsibility as corporate leaders and as people that are running large organizations, that you have a moral responsibility to take care of your people. And we are going to talk about the spiritual, the physical, the mental, all of the things today. And Dr. Ajita Robinson, for those of you who have not met Dr. Ajita, she has opened my eyes to what trauma is. And
mm.
anytime I have a conversation with Dr. Ajita, I can be talking about my daughter going to school, and she's like, there's trauma in that. And I was like, what do you mean? She's going to college. She's like, she has to grieve her past life. She's going from a home to a college. She's got all these pressures as a young adult. And then I'll talk to her about something else. And she was like, first responders, there's trauma in that. And like anything that we encounter in our lives, I didn't understand how trauma plays a role. Watching a TV show, watching something happen on the news, and us experiencing vicarious trauma, which I didn't even understand. So she's opened my eyes to that. So thank you, Dr. Jetta, for being here. Dr. Jada Moore Ruffin is amazing. One of the things that I learned from her is just how we, as high performers, as women, as business owners, managing homes, managing businesses, managing lives, managing families, we take on a lot. And often we can burn out mentally, physically, and spiritually. And Dr. Jada has been one of the people that have opened my eyes to what's possible when it comes to setting boundaries, when it comes to identifying what's happening, and even understanding how that shows up in our bodies and our lives and our hormones and all of these things that I just never put that connection together. So thank you, Dr. Jada, for being here. Dr. Lauren is the food is medicine queen. And one of the things that Dr. Lauren, first of all, if you ever get a chance to eat anything that she cooks, she's got a seasoning line, she's got a cookbook, she's got a whole bunch of things. But I never understood how food affects how my brain works and how I show up. She's like, the thing that you ate last night affects how you show up at work the next day. I'm like, what? And when we're feeding people and we're like, hey, free bagels, we take care of our employees, and your employees are dragging by 10 a.m., there's a reason. So, one of the things that I think is just incredible in Dr. Lauren's work is she is really helping us understand how food shows up for our performance and our brains and our work and our bodies, and how we really can choose to eat healthier and just perform on a higher level. So thank you, Dr. Lauren. Super excited that you're here. Um, Dr. Tracy Marks is, there's so many things that this woman knows about our brain and about performance. And one of the things that Dr. Tracy has really helped people understand is resilience. And resilience, to me, I think there are certain things that are like common sense. Can you teach common sense? I thought resilience was one of those things that either you had it or you didn't. And these are things that all of these doctors that are sharing with us today can teach and have been able to teach as a skill and help employees and workplaces be better and be more resilient and understand how these things show up in work and in life. Because many of us go to work and if we have our parents' generation, you don't bring things to work. You keep your
Mhm.
problems at home. You don't take things to work, but that's where we spend a majority of our time. So if we don't have support when we're not okay, then how are we supposed to function? So Dr. Tracy and the work that she's doing with brains and performance and resilience and just understanding the muscles that we can build and the neural pathways that we can build and rewire our brain to be stronger and fortify our brain is incredible. And last but not least is Dr. Shelley Fraser Trotman Scott. And she has the longest last name of all of us, but it is goes with her credentials. So one of the things that's just amazing about Dr. Shelley's brain, I'm going to have to call you Dr. Shelley, just like you're the only one that I'm going to have to go with. Um, her brain works almost in frameworks and processes. So when we have conversations about different things and when she's training people, I see the aha moments come alive where they're just things click that may have not ever clicked before. And I think the pressure that leaders are under, especially as older leaders are aging out, as newer
Mhm.
leaders are being put in positions because they're good at a craft or good at a trade, but they don't necessarily have leadership skills, then I think it's something we have to understand. It is our duty and responsibility to empower them and give them the tools that they need to be successful. So I'm so excited about this panel. I'm already over time. I'm keeping track of time because we are going to try and get you in and out and have this be an amazing session. If you are watching this on replay and you have questions for any of the doctors, you have to tag them with like @ Dr. Ajita, Dr. Jada, Dr. Tracy, whoever you're trying to reach, because we will not see it after we finish going live. So live land is different than replay land. So just make sure that you tag whichever doctor you want to connect with and have questions with. And please connect with every single one of them on LinkedIn, which is where they show their genius as well. So, Dr. Jett, I'd like to start with you. I think that one of the things that are important to talk about is mental health and climates that are around us, whether they're war, political, economic, affects how we show up at work. So, what do you think is one of the biggest threats around mental health in the workplace that's going on right now?
I think one of the biggest threats is that we pretend that those external forces are not being compounded by what's happening within the organization. I think one of the challenges with that is that we pretend that people come to work as blank slates. And so what that means is that oftentimes as leaders in the workplace, we really kind of vacate our responsibility to address the full person, including what is coming to work and how not addressing those challenges leaves our team feeling fragmented and really dishonored in a lot of ways, right? People are coming to work grieving, people are coming to work traumatized, and that absolutely shows up in the workplace. It shows up in how we interact with one another. And they are looking for organizational leaders to set the tone for how we handle one another, but how we also handle those very difficult and heavy conversations. And it is ongoing. And so do we have a culture of wellness? Is it a living, breathing thing, or is it a policy that we leave and segment out for EAP, right? That we then delegate or defer, or is it a living part of our culture? And if it is, there should be some proof. It should not be reactionary leadership. It should be servant leadership that shows up in the day-to-day honoring and spearheading these conversations, creating space for them because they are living and breathing in the organization. They're either disrupting or they're promoting cohesion. And so I think it's a disservice if we pretend that they're not there.
Okay. So Dr. Tracy, I think that what we're seeing is leaders are under more pressure than they've been under before. They're expected to improve productivity. They're expecting that all these demands come from human beings, and they don't necessarily understand the toll on those people, especially when it comes to their cognitive health. So what do you think leaders can do to use brain-based strategies to help employees build resilience so we can take it? Like, how can we take it? Oh, wait, I can't hear Dr. Tracy. Hold on.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
I was going to town. Okay. So first, I just want to say that resilience goes beyond personality and temperament, though those things do play into it. But it's about how the brain adapts to stress and adversity. And this happens through neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to rewire itself based on repeated experiences. And so there are multiple aspects to resilience. I'll just focus on two. One is cognitive flexibility and self-efficacy. Cognitive flexibility allows the brain to shift perspectives and problem solve. And at work, this can look like adaptability, the ability to adjust to new challenges and change course when needed, when there's reorgs and things like that, and to stay solution focused. Self-efficacy, on the other hand, is the belief in your own ability to be able to handle challenges. And it develops when the brain links effort to success, reinforcing the idea that persistence leads to positive outcomes. So the good news is that both of these can be trained in the workplace. And so here are two ways that leaders can foster adaptability and strengthen self-efficacy. So when it comes to adaptability, encourage it by thinking in possibilities. So when employees get stuck in rigid thinking, they struggle to adjust when plans change. So leaders can rewire this tendency by training teams to generate multiple solutions instead of just fixating on a single answer. Here's an example. So before finalizing decisions, you could ask teams, what's another way that we could approach this? And this simple action, I mean, that seems very minor, but the simple action can strengthen the brain's ability to shift perspectives, making adaptability just second nature. Then here's the second tip for self-efficacy. You can strengthen self-efficacy with small wins. So self-efficacy grows when employees see that their efforts lead to results. So you can help employees track and celebrate small milestones. Even a quick acknowledgement, if you don't have someone in place for milestone tracking. You could say something like, this was a tough project, but your approach to solving X really worked. And this small action reinforces neural pathways in your brain for confidence and motivation. So my takeaway here is that prioritizing resilience helps build a brain that can adapt, problem solve, and persist through challenges. And leaders can strengthen their employees' cognitive flexibility and self-efficacy to create strong teams that grow and evolve, even in the face of adversity.
Okay, thank you. So, I think we had talked about this. I think all of us have had this conversation. So the U.S. Surgeon General put out a report that basically said work is making us sick, physically, mentally. Work in the United States specifically is making us sick. And I guess when I think of the Surgeon General, I think of when back in the 70s, when they came out, and maybe they came out before that, they were like, cigarettes will kill you. So I feel like when the Surgeon General comes out and says things, we should pay attention. But if we spend so much time at work and it's making us sick, then isn't it the organization's responsibility to help make sure that that doesn't happen? I guess I just feel like that. But Dr. Jada, I want to flip it over to you because I feel like burnout isn't an individual issue. It's systemic. Like it's a big problem. So how can organizations shift their approach to burnout, not being reactive, like, oh, I'm so sorry that you're burned out, but what can we do to prevent this from happening in the first place?
Absolutely. That's a great point. And I was really appreciative to see the emphasis by the Surgeon General on something that I think we often overlook is what is the impact of our workplace on how we live and function. There are three things that I think about when it comes to burnout. It's dysregulation. That means we're not regulating well in three categories: physical, psychological, and emotional. And one of the important things for team leaders and those who are in leadership roles is to be able to recognize when these things are happening. The other thing is stress. We talked a little bit about stress, but I don't think we think about the sources of stress often enough. The financial stressors, relationship stressors, physical stressors, family, environmental, and then add in work stressors. Over 80%, there was a study that 80% of people felt like work stressors were significantly impacting their personal lives. And so when you look at that dichotomy that kind of gets collapsed together, it definitely makes work a source of stress. And therefore, it's important for organizations to recognize this and not make the assumption that all stress comes from without, but that some of it comes from within. And it's important for us to be able to assist leaders in the organizations to not only recognize dysregulation in people, but to understand sources of stress and be able to provide resources. And those stressors can sometimes be chronic and they can be acute. When we think about workplace harassment, bullying, things like that, there are undertones that people don't often feel empowered to even be able to do anything about workplace stressors. The next thing is coping mechanisms. And very often they are maladaptive. That means that we don't use adaptive measures that are healthy. We think of other unhealthy ways because it's quick. It gives a quick turnaround. We feel better. Sometimes it's food. Sometimes it's alcohol, shopping, different distractions, avoidance, code switching, another thing that we often do. So it's really important to recognize that there's an opportunity for awareness around coping mechanisms and then training and sometimes needing to retrain team members as a group and around adaptive rather than maladaptive coping mechanisms. And the last thing that I want to touch on is the spiritual aspect. Sometimes when we think spiritual, we automatically think religion, and that's not always the case. For many people, we come to work in the context of all the other ways that we exist in our world. When I talk about spiritual as it relates to the workplace, it's the person's ability to maintain their sense of self, their sense of well-being within the organization, that their sense of purpose and why they're here on this earth is being fulfilled, and that they have a sense of connection, not just to their purpose, but to the people that are around them. And as you mentioned, we spend a significant part of our workday interconnected. So those connections should be strong, and our environment in the workplace is responsible for fostering those healthy environments. So I think if we look at the collective experience outside of work and inside of work, we can see ways that we can not only recognize and react, but prevent burnout.
It doesn't sound hard when you say it, but I feel like we're not doing the best job when it comes to being preventative with it. So speaking of systemic, food is a whole, like, we don't even have enough time to talk about the systemic problems with food. But I want to just bring in Dr. Lauren, your perspective, because we are talking to workplaces and incorporating nutrition and workplace wellness. Now, I also understand that from working with you that you wholeheartedly believe that certain foods can prevent chronic diseases and certain diseases are caused by certain foods. So how does food and nutrition play a role in boosting productivity and improving the quality of the lives of our employees, and also preventing costly health costs, health insurance costs, time off? How does that all play into the factor of treating our employees and making sure that they're well?
Thanks, Bethany. So we know food is a big topic of conversation. We know that food and eating well can improve our health, but then the opposite is true as well. We know those that are not eating well are at increased risk for chronic disease. Those chronic disease show up in various ways: hypertension, diabetes, certain types of cancers, people being unable to optimally show up at work. Because while I like to teach and work with corporations about what we can do to improve nutrition, I'm also a primary care provider that's writing medical leave for patients who cannot work because their health is poor. And we know so many chronic diseases are directly related to food. food has become very confusing. And I think corporations have a unique position in that they can be not just a hub that shares good information, but is also an example. So how are we feeding our employees? What are we giving them to start their day? What are we doing when we have luncheons and learning and things like that? Today, I called it a marathon day. It was a marathon day for me. So what did that mean? It's how I fueled my body at night and how I broke my fast this morning so that I could optimally get through all of the things that I had to get through and serve well. And I think that's what we want for our employees. And I think that's what employers want to give their employees. And so working with corporations to teach them not just what the corporation itself can do to feed their employees well, but just providing an educational source for their employees so that their health can be better. Because if their health is better, then they're going to show up better for work each day.
So, Dr. Shelley, I just want to flip things over to you because I feel like with the pressure that people are under to perform, these things might seem like nutrition might not like seem like a corporate thing or organization thing, and burnout might seem like something that somebody personally has to deal with. So if leaders are already overwhelmed in their own lives and they have to perform and help their team perform, what do you think that organizations can do to create a workplace or a culture that's sustainable? Like, how can you have a high performing leader or person or organization and sustain that?
Right, right. Because balance is the issue. Balance, or not even balance, it's the integration of work and life. And so, to create a culture of sustained productivity, leaders have to move beyond those traditional approaches. They have to embrace things that are innovative, look at strategies that actually align with both organizational goals and the human center values. So, what comes to mind for me very quickly are three transformative strategies. Like, first, we have to lead with clarity and purpose. It's hard to say one thing to someone and then expect them to follow your lead, and you're not doing what you're saying. You're not eating your own food, as Lauren was saying. You're not eating well. You're telling them, take time, work out, do this, but you're not doing that. First, you have to make sure that you ensure that every team member understands just how their work connects with the vision of the organization. So you set those clear goals and objectives. You foster that sense of purpose. When your individuals, when your team members see how their contribution actually drives the collective success, they will be more engaged, they will be more invested. Put things up there for them so that they can see it. Put visualized workflows. Um, Make sure that your key performance indicators are actually aligned and collaborative, and make sure those goal setting sessions take place, because it's all invaluable. The second thing that you do is empower them through inclusion and strength-based leadership. So inclusive leadership is not a buzzword, and we know that inclusion has been a word that has really been out and about here lately, but it is a catalyst for innovation and growth. So you need to take time to identify the unique strengths of your team members and align their skill with their passion. The strength-based approach actually fuels that motivation, and it enhances their creativity, and it improves their overall team dynamics. And it also provides a space where diverse voices are heard, and then their values are strengthened, and they begin to trust because they know that you care about them as an individual. And then finally, just embed wellness and flexibility within the culture. Sustained productivity is deeply tied to the well-being of the team. So you as the leader must prioritize your self-care. You need to make sure that your team is okay. You need to adopt policies and practices that emphasize balance. Look at that flexible scheduling. Make sure, do a check-in. How are you feeling? How are you doing? Provide them with professional development opportunities so that they feel as if you care, so that they are actually growing. So we know that productivity really just thrives in environments where people actually feel supported and not overwhelmed. So by incorporating a few of those strategies, leading by example, making sure that you are exhibiting the behaviors that you wish to see in your team, leading with purpose and inclusivity and care. It's not just going to improve performance, it's actually going to create a culture where excellence is a natural byproduct. So, empower, engaged, fulfilled individuals, that's what you want. And by doing some of those things, that could bring it all to fruition.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Dr. Jada, I think we've seen in the last couple of years, so years ago, there would be ERGs and employee resource groups, and there wouldn't be a lot. There would be like parents and minorities. And now there are so many different ERG groups as people identify as different things. So they may be caregivers, they may be LGBTQ plus, they might be neurodivergent. So there's all these kind of groupings of people that are all different abilities, all different identities. And we've also seen in the data that those people that might identify differently struggle more than the average person, whatever you define as average, whatever that average person is. So how can leaders that are trying to support people, they have high performers, but they also have so many different types of people that are underrepresented and also sometimes under supported. How can those leaders prevent burnout in some of the groups that might not feel safe saying they're not okay? Does that make sense?
I think I do, and I'll take a shot at it. And
Okay.
is what I hear, and not to get into some of the buzzy words, as Dr. Shelley mentioned, is that in the high tech society, we still have to realize that there's a high touch impact with the people that we are working with, and that translates to the work that they output. So if we're looking at this variety of people with different needs, different cultures, different things that they identify with. And I'll give some examples that are outside of the typical idea of diversity. And especially when we think about ERG groups, think about caregivers. That's a category that has nothing to do with race. It doesn't have anything to do with culture. Caregiving, especially in the sandwich generation, where some of your employees are dealing with small children, school-age children, and they're dealing with elderly parents, parents who may be ill, siblings who are ill. And so when we really step outside of the typical race and ethnicity and think about how many ways people are doing life, then I think ERGs and support begins to make sense. What we have to do is normalize that and make space for that and allow those groups to not try to support themselves from within. Having the support, when we think about old fashioned support groups where everybody comes in and basically commiserates, well, what if we had support within the support so that there's workshops, seminars, trainings, access to hotlines, on demand education tools, speakers, ways that your team can kind of rely on not just themselves, but outside sources, professional sources that can help them to develop game plans or blueprints for things that they need to accomplish. And therefore, it translates, it cycles back into work performance and productivity. So if we think about prevention, it's recognizing who's your audience, therefore, who are your teams made of, and how can we build in support for them? before there's crisis, before they need FMLA, before they need to take leave, before they're in the emergency room for stress. So I think those are some of the things that companies can think about, is supporting the support.
Yeah. So if Dr. Lauren, if I think of, it's to just piggyback off of Dr. Jada's topic about support, if I think of meal planning and eating, that is something that some organizations might think is a personal thing. So they might not see that as support, but I think what our society has done very well has made it easy to get fast, unhealthy food and made it affordable. So if we have busy workers that don't have time from the time they get out of their last meeting to pick up 6 different kids that all have to be at different places at different times, the fastest thing is to go through a drive-through or to have food ordered and you just shovel it down before you go to the next thing. So is this a personal responsibility, or is this something that organizations can do to support their employees when it comes to their physical health?
Bethany, I always say an organization can choose to invest in their employees' health up front, or they can pay for it on the back end. And so investing in some nutrition and education to improve their overall health, we know that when people improve their health, they are decreasing the number of medications that they're on. And we know someone's paying for those medications. I'm paying for a part as an employee. Someone else is paying for that other part as the employer. If I'm in the hospital, that's a shared cost. And so, paying to improve somebody's health and giving them the tools and the resources that they need is really to the advantage of the organizations. It's very expensive to have an employee off. It's very expensive to have to train somebody else to do that person's job, or to have someone out and now you got to retrain someone or rehire someone and go through all that process again. So again, you're either going to pay upfront, or you're going to pay for it on the back end. And I just personally think it's better if we invest and spend the time and the education and the resources to help our employees be healthy, to prevent disease, to improve illness, to manage disease, to reverse disease, to get off medication upfront.
Yes. And I think you had told me that Harvard did a study, somebody did a study on the ROI on employee health. So I think there was some data that for every dollar that was invested, they would get, I don't know if you remember the actual dollar back. But it was.
Yeah, I don't remember the actual dollar back, but there's data that supports for every dollar spent that you get a 3-fold return. And I know for me, if there was an investment where I could pay $1 and get 3 back, I would make that investment. And so I think it just speaks to just how valuable and important this is. And honestly, Bethany, I think about it in a broader sense. Like, by helping your employee be healthier, that has a domino effect. Because if I'm healthier, my family's healthier, my spouse is healthier, my kids are healthier, my community's healthier, my friends are healthier, because I'm going to share what I'm learning. I'm going to share how that helped me. So I think it goes just beyond, if we want to think about just, thinking in a bigger case and thinking about legacy. Investing in the health of your employees is really investing in the health of our future workforce.
And I think it's the physical health, but it's also the mental health. So I think in the past, mental health has been something that you're not supposed to get support at work. That's not for somebody to bring in Dr. Ajita to talk about trauma and harm that has been done at your job, at your organization, and to feel like that's a burden, like you're doing something super special and super extra. That there's a benefit to us being healthier, physically healthier, mentally healthier, spiritually healthier as human beings and as employees. So I feel like it's this thing that so many organizations like to say they have these benefits, and like to say, oh, well, we bring in happy hour on Friday, and oh, we have a massage, but they're not taking care of the human, of the person. Yeah. They're adding perks and they're spending money on those perks. But for what? Like, what is the benefit of that, other than like we have a table, like a foosball table? Who cares? Like, and I think, and I'm not trying to bash culture. So if you have a foosball table, I'm not talking about you specifically. I just think that we have to shift our perspective of what is our responsibility to care for our people that spend a majority of their life for us, doing things for us. So Dr. Shelley, if I can flip back over to you, I think that these conversations require bold leaders. And bold leaders might have to buck the norm, might have to buck the system. So how do you approach things that aren't necessarily conventional, where it might be something unconventional, but you need to inspire wellness and transformation. And transformation is not easy work. So how do you do that when there's all these systemic things, there's all these organizational culture things? There might be older leadership that's aging out that doesn't believe that this is work's responsibility. So what advice do you have for things when leaders have to be bold or unconventional so they can transform?
Well, we're here to talk about bold innovations on employee wellness, so we might as well talk about bold leadership. But it is a catalyst actually for wellness and innovation. So when leaders think about unconventionally inspiring the transformation of wellness within their place, they had to unlock those new possibilities for their team and their organization. So one powerful an unconventional approach is normalizing wellness sabbaticals. And and that is a cornerstone for organizational culture. And I know a lot of people want to stay away from that because everybody feels like you have to be at work to work. But a wellness sabbatical doesn't always mean months away from work. It can be a structured, intentional pause. So just pause. It can be a day, a week, just where you tell your employees to step back from those daily responsibilities at work. Try to restore themselves. That could include like a mindfulness retreat, community service, personal passion projects. Like Dr. Lauren may go and cook healthy meals for people. Dr. Jada may do a wellness hike. Dr. Ajita may listen to some people and hear what they have to say. Although that seems like work, that's something that is her passion project. So she would do that. And the trauma too is what Dr. Tracy would probably just say, okay, let me just listen and see, or the brain piece, and let me figure out what I can do to help someone else and pull back from that. It makes this approach transformative because it's intentional. It's intentional. It signals your team that wellness is not just encouraged, but we're actually prioritizing that. Um, Leaders who actually embrace this model, they'll show that the innovation actually begins with valuing people over their productivity metrics. So when you come back from your retreat, when you come back from your professional learning, when you come back from that pause, you're going to come back and you're going to plug it in, and you're going to do extremely well. You're going to have that sustained success. And it's really because you are healthy, and your workforce is has that vitality of the workforce is actually there. So again, we have to take our own sabbaticals as leaders, take our own, share the experience openly. I went to Florida over the weekend, and I still got some work, but it was just a change of environment for me that let people know that I was feeling better. Make time for renewal and growth. That shows that, hey, I'm here. I'm on my board meeting, but I'm in the background where it's sunny and the birds are chirping, and I'm not in the snow and ice. It's vulnerable. I'm building trust with the team when I tell them that I'm actually taking time out for me. It's inspiring that culture of balance, and it actually demonstrates that I am a bold leader. I just don't talk about it, I live it. So you know that saying, don't talk about it, be about it. And so by weaving those wellness sabbaticals into the fabric of your organization, you can cultivate an environment where individuals actually feel supported to thrive personally and professionally, and it'll create a ripple effect. They'll show up for you because you have shown up for them. And just really quickly, another way is to just be willing to go beyond that surface level, those gestures and embrace approaches. So not just the bagels. Bagels are good, but according to Dr. Lauren, they're not. So, um, but bagels are good and everything else. But it's just like, you know what? You can leave an hour earlier today. Mm-hmm. Go beyond that to just let them know, because time is something that you cannot get back. We can lose weight, we can do all these different things, but we can't regain our time. Right. So just show them that you are committed to their well-being, especially when they are performing and doing exactly what it is that that you need for them to do.
Yes.
So
that's it. One of the things that Dr. Tracy has this incredible newsletter on LinkedIn that comes out every week. And she's got a bomb YouTube channel that, like, I don't even know how many videos she has on it, but she's got 2 million subscribers. So Dr. Tracy's a real deal when it comes to videos. And one of the things that she had said in her newsletter talks about the brain and sleep, and how sleep hygiene, like if we don't get rest, they showed a rested brain and like one that doesn't have sleep, and it doesn't even look like, it looks like the same, but it does not look like the same thing. So when we're talking about setting boundaries, and I think as high performing women, sometimes some of us struggle with this because we have so many things and we have so many people relying on us, whether it's in our business or our team. But Dr. Tracy, when we're looking at how the balance and sleep hygiene and all of these things help us build the muscle of resilience, help us be able to perform, how does that show up? How can organizations actually design a work environment to support these things that are essential for us as humans, that are essential for us to preserve our brain? Which seems like a simple thing, but if we're in an organization that expects us to respond to an email at 11 o'clock at night, they're not giving us a chance to rest. They're not giving us a chance to recover. So how do you balance the demands of being a high-performing leader that has to be resilient and has to be always on, but also isn't giving their body or their brain time or rest or recovery?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So yes, sleep is essential, just like food. And I loved your question about addressing what seems like a personal issue versus a workplace issue. Like how can we take ownership of this as a workplace issue instead of looking at these as just people's personal habits? But I want to change the focus of the question a little bit to look at how organizations or how people can change their environment, the workplace environment, to build resilience. Because in my previous answer, I was talking about building resilience for the individual, and sleep hygiene and enhancing that is one of those ways. I didn't mention that, but that is one way. But the workplace itself plays a big role in shaping how employees respond to stress. And so a high stress, high pressure culture that never allows for recovery wires the brain for reactivity and burnout. And instead, organizations need to be intentional about creating an environment that strengthens resilience over time. So here's 2 ways that they can do this at scale. One is balance challenging work with recovery. You could probably think of this as a step before the sabbatical, which I'd love to go on one myself right now, but before needing a sabbatical, actually building in recovery within the workplace or within like the work process. So sustained resilience comes from balancing high demand tasks and with intentional recovery periods. And organizations can build this into daily workflows. And some ways they can do that are protecting deep focus time, schedule no meeting blocks, or quiet workplaces or quiet work periods so that employees can tackle cognitively demanding tasks without all the constant interruptions. And if you are someone who struggles with attention and executive functions, or even have the least little bit of attention deficit, all of those interruptions can just crush you. Another way is easing transitions between intense work cycles. So allow for lighter workloads or flexible time after high pressure projects before moving on to another big task. And then the third way you can do this is encouraging active recovery. So instead of it just being more of a mental break, have it be an active recovery time, like walking breaks or team resets. An informal brainstorming session can help employees recharge without disengaging. Number two, environment change that you can make, work environment change, is training leaders to reduce cognitive overload. And employees aren't just overwhelmed by their workload, they're overloaded by constant decision making, shifting priorities, competing demands for their attentions. So organizations can train managers to reduce unnecessary cognitive load by limiting last minute priority shifts. So employees aren't constantly adjusting to unexpected changes. Using clearer communication hierarchies to reduce ambiguity and decision fatigue, and create predictable workflows. Our inner toddlers love predictability and routine, and we still want that. So create these predictable workflows so that employees can focus their mental energy on problem solving and creativity instead of navigating constant disruptions. Mm-hmm. So in essence, what I just said was organizations can strengthen resilience at scale by embedding these structured recovery times into the work rhythms and by reducing cognitive overload so that employees can operate at their best without getting mentally exhausted.
Okay. I hope this is recorded. So all the things that everybody's saying, you do not have to scramble and write them down. This will be here forever time. So Dr. Ajita, I just want to wrap with you. I know a few of you have to leave in a few minutes. So I think that many organizations are probably grappling with hidden costs that are directly caused from workplace trauma. And they think it's low engagement, or it might show up as absenteeism, or maybe they have high turnover. So how can leaders identify that trauma even exists in their workplace? What does that show up as? And what are some of the steps that they can take so they're informed how to lead through this? And how would they even know? And what can they do if it's happening? Oh, muted. Hold on.
Sorry about that. So one thing that employers and workplaces can certainly do to build a trauma-informed workplace and really kind of address it is they're constantly collecting data, but are we listening and implementing what we're learning? Because it's not as if we're not getting feedback, right? Far too often we find that organizations conduct these pulse checks, these kind of engagement surveys, and then nothing changes. And so what this does is that we see a significant gap there between what's said and what's done. And that alone erodes trust, right? So why do I keep participating in these opportunities to give you my feedback, to talk about what's happening, what I'm concerned with, if nothing is happening? And so trauma-informed workplace isn't just about acknowledging the stress and the hardship that we're all facing. It's about creating systems and environments that respond to it in meaningful ways. And so I kind of want to back us up just a little bit and talk about what trauma-informed leadership is, because this has become a bit of a buzzword, but specifically, what does it mean in this climate that we're navigating? And I think it's really about being able to recognize that every individual brings their lived experience, whether that be grief, loss, past workplace toxicity, current workplace toxicity, or systemic inequities, which still exist, into the personal life, into their workplace, regardless of where that may be. And while we can't control what happens outside of work, we have a responsibility for how we respond, the policies that we create, how we implement those policies. And trauma-informed leadership prioritizes psychological safety. It ensures employees feel value beyond their output, and that acknowledges that their well-being is separate from performance. And in fact, addressing workplace safety, their whole person well-being, is the fuel for productivity and performance and innovation. And so one of the practical ways I mentioned was anonymous feedback and implementation. And so it's one of the simplest, effective reasons to really start this process because it does give employees a place to kind of share what's really happening without the fear of retaliation, which unfortunately has happened and continues to happen. The power isn't in the survey itself. And so I want to be very clear about that. It's in the follow through. That piece is important. So if you ask employees what they need and then you fail to act, you're reinforcing the very distrust and disengagement that trauma informed leaders and leadership seeks to eliminate. So I think this is more action. So being able to build trust through action, however small, right? Because some of us are kind of starting over and rebuilding this piece is a foundation for a workplace that has and supports both employee well-being and retention. A lot of things have been what's been coming up in our conversations most recently is how attachment and conflict and communication styles show up in the workplace and how this is a form of disruptive and servant leadership, right? And so a deeper layer of work I think that workplace culture has to do and is shaped by is how leaders handle conflict and communication, and especially conflict through times of communication, right? And I think there's so many times in which we think maybe attachment theory and how that shows up is personal, but it also shows up in our leadership style in our workplaces. So think about this. A leader with an avoidant attachment style is most likely to kind of resist difficult conversations. These conversations that could help your employers, your middle managers lead through times of uncertainty, through times of crisis. They're looking for us to lean into transparency and avoidance is and a lack of responsiveness, again, is to the detriment of that. Avoidant and anxious leaders, right? Leaders with these types of attachment and communication styles often leave unresolved conflicts in the workplace for their team to kind of manage, right? And so tension and lack of team cohesion and morale all are affected by these gaps in leadership. These gaps cost companies billions in turnover and disengagement and lost innovation. Finally, I would say that a trauma informed leadership isn't just about what we ask of employees, it's about what we model.
Hmm.
You can't tell employees to prioritize mental health while wearing hyperproductivity and burnout as a badge of honor. Those are in conflict. So, leaders, servant leaders, transformative leaders, trauma informed leaders model self care. We set the boundaries. We normalize mental health days. We lead with emotional intelligence. We set the tone for our teams. They are watching what you do far more than listening to what you say, especially when they are not in alignment. I think these pieces are so critical. So when leaders are well, teams thrive. When teams are thriving, businesses not only survive, they scale. They live through the challenges, the uncertainty, the inequities that happens when we have transitions of power, that happens when we have a down season. So I think that if leaders take one action from today, listen, learn, and implement, conduct the surveys, gather the insights, but most importantly, and I cannot reiterate this more, take meaningful action. Not the figurehead action, not the one that's glamorized, not the one that looks good, not sometimes not even the one that looks good, because trauma-informed workplaces are places where words don't build trust, actions do.
I don't want to talk after.
I don't want to talk after.
What do I say? Thank.
What do I say? Thank
There's an echo. Do you guys hear an echo?
you guys hear an echo? I'll mute myself.
Mm. Thank you. If there's anyone else that wants to add anything, now's the time. We have 2 minutes before we wrap. I am so grateful for all of you. And I know everyone can see why you all were award-winning doctors in corporate wellness and all the things that you do. That's part of what they do. That's just a very small part of the impact and the actions that these women are taking to ensure that we live healthy, happy, long lives. And it is, and I sound like a broken record, but I think it's our organization's responsibilities to make sure that happens. And regardless of the cost, regardless, there is an ROI that's been proven over and over again. And I'm so grateful that you all took time from your busy schedules. And I know some of you are running to events, and some of you are running to patients, and some of you are running to other things. So I will let you go. Again, if you're watching this on the replay and you want to get in touch with any of the doctors, they're all tagged somewhere here. You should be able to find them. I will make sure that our team puts their contact information in the chat somewhere. So there should be some comments. I know there were a bunch of thank you all for joining. I know there were a bunch of messages in the chat, and we'll get to those. It's hard to multitask, especially when we had so many brilliant people on, and I wanted to make sure that they all had a chance to talk. So thank you, ladies. I appreciate you being here. And here is to an incredible, resilient year and getting through all the things. So I really appreciate it. Have an amazing day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.